Welcome to Family Sunday. It's good to see you guys. Pastor Bill is going to be coming up and sharing God's Word with us in just a moment. I just got two quick announcements for you. The first is we officially launched our Impact School of Discipleship this week. It was an incredible week. Super excited for this next journey moving forward. Thank you guys for being willing to support that and let us host it here at the church, and being behind that 1,000% means the world to us. And then second, next week is our Serve First Sunday. Remember, here at the gathering, we believe that just like Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many, we believe one of the first things we should do as Christians, as followers of Jesus, is to give our lives in service for others. So the first Sunday of every month, we don't meet for a worship service, we meet for community service. And this week, it's going to be next week, we're going to be doing something a little unusual. We're kind of getting out of the box and doing stuff you would probably never do at church, but hey, we're the gathering, so what the heck, right? We're doing something called Porndemic. We're going to be addressing the issue of pornography in our society. The recent studies that have come out show that 8 out of 10 men, and there's no difference between Christian, evangelical Christians and the cultural, 8 in 10 men look at porn at least on an occasional basis, 6 in 10 on a weekly basis, 4 in 10 multiple times every day. So this is something that's no longer a fringe issue. It's not something that is kind of just out there for a few. This is becoming culturally pervasive. And so we want to address that as the church, right? We believe that God's our healer and he wants to heal all those things, not just physical sickness, but soul sickness and addiction and all those things. So, and even if it's not a part of your family, your experience, you know someone who it's a part of their experience. And we want to be able to be used and equipped by Jesus to be instruments of healing and restoration for everyone that we know. So I want to encourage you to come out with it. Guys, I know this is one of those things where we're like, oh, I'm not going to go to a porn conference or a porn seminar. But like I said last time, if you don't show up, we know you're struggling. So just kidding. Just kidding. But I do want everyone to come out. Let's take this seriously as a family. Let's get equipped. We've got a special psychologist who's coming to talk about the brain chemistry behind it all, as well as a biblical perspective. So it's going to be a really balanced, really helpful time together. So mark your calendars for that. We'll see you next Sunday here at 10 o'clock at the church. And without further ado, let's welcome Pastor Bill as he comes to share God's Word with us.
Thanks, George. Well, Becky, where are you at? Right in front of my face. Where's that Danielle lady? Danielle lady, come up here also. I'm going to call both these ladies up here because what I am going to be sharing today is actually what our kids receive every week in the back here. In case you're wondering, like, once they leave this room, what happens to them? Do we just play games? Do we just, draw on pages? Do we do nothing and just babysit? And the answer is no. Absolutely. And so these two ladies lead our kids' church department. And if you could, Becky, just share what it is, like what curriculum we're using, and just keep it short, because I'm going to go easily 50, 60 minutes here already. So.
All right, you want to give me this mic? You sure?
Yeah, I'll give you 12 or 13 minutes. So.
Okay, so every Sunday, if you know me well, you know it's not childcare, it's children's ministry. We're doing serious work back there. So every Sunday, we're going through a plan called the Gospel Project, and we're going through the Bible chronologically. We started back in October, so we're well into it right now, but the kids are super engaged. We have a great time. So what you see this morning is actually what we do with the kids every Sunday. So we hope you enjoy it. And kids, we're looking forward to you participating, just like you do in the back, okay? In our classrooms, you guys are always super engaged and asking questions. So we want to see that here too.
I do. I want to see that. Ladies, thank you for ministering to our children in the way that you do. So what I'm going to do is some of you may not know who I am because I'm not always inside this room. Sometimes I'm back there with the kids, and then also now Aaron and myself are engaged in helping getting a student ministry going as well with the church. But I'm one of the pastors here at the church, and I've been actually at this location for over 18 years. So I've seen a lot of changes in this building and this property, especially over the last 2 years. And anyhow, but what I'm going to start with is what we would typically start with in our kids program. They have a little bit of more introductory stuff, but the worship singing, we can't get past that. That was more than enough introduction to what's going on. And what is awesome is the songs are actually all about deliverance, about freedom, about hope. And that's what what we sang about, and that's what today's lesson is about. And in each time the kids go through these sessions, there's little I don't know what they're called. I think that they're called like sections, 3 or 4 sections of teaching, and each one has a thematic verse. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to read this out loud as a church family. And so let's go ahead and start it. This is Numbers 23:19. God is not a man, so he does not lie. He is not human, so he does not change his mind. Has he ever spoken and failed to act? Has he ever promised and not carried it through? This is an important theme for us to understand about who our God is, because oftentimes, even as believers who have been walking with the Lord for a while, sometimes we have a tendency to kind of forget who he is because we might be more interested in who we are and what our problems are and how I resolve my issues and what's going on in my life around me that's falling apart or coming together. We have to remember God is not us, he is God. And he never fails to act. He never fails to keep his promises. And so that's the theme we're going to be looking at moving forward into today's lesson. But I'm going to start with the question. And it's going to be asked in a way, let me bring this up a little closer. It's going lower. Where am I at? Lower? There. Thank you. So here's what I'm going to ask as the adults, first of all. How many of you brought your Bibles? And firstly, you have your phones. You're like, I got my Bible with me, wherever it goes. So that's good, because the reason why we bring our Bibles is because the Bible is the true living Word of God. Everything in it is true and trustworthy. And when we get confused by it, or when there's areas of Scripture that don't make sense to us, that seem contradictory, the issue doesn't lie in God and his Word. It lies in our understanding and our perception and bringing in even our own cultural understandings of things that God has worked through other cultures over the many centuries. And so, kids, I'm going to ask you the same question. And here's what the question is. Did you bring your Bibles? Kids, no, I get this every week. We need to get the Bibles going on. But we supply Bibles for the kids that don't have them. But we're working on that. We don't think that they're less than if they don't have a Bible. But if your child does not own a Bible, could you please see us? We would be more than delighted to make sure that they have one if they don't have one. But here's where I'm going to start now. We have been working our way through the books of the Bible. Or I'm sorry, let me start over. We've been working our way through the stories of the books of the Bible, and it started all right here in the beginning book, which is called what? Who knows the beginning book? Genesis. What does the word Genesis mean? Beginnings. The word Genesis means beginning. So these are the themes that they've already learned. I'm not going to teach on these because otherwise we're going to be here like till tomorrow. But God created the world. God created people. Creation glorifies God. Sin entered the world. Sin spread to people. God spared Noah. People rebel against God. God made a covenant with Abraham. And this is an extremely important theme that continues to weave itself through the rest of the Old Testament into the New, that through Abraham's seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed, and that includes ourselves. Melchizedek blessed Abraham. God provided Isaac. God changed Jacob. God had a plan for Joseph, and God controls everything. And so each one of these themes has been a theme that the children have been learning every Sunday. So that's since, what was it, October, Becky? Something like that when we started with this whole thing. And so here's where I want to ask the question, because this is the big question. Does God keep his promises? Yes. Girls? So boys say yes, girls? Yes. They're in agreement. The boys and girls are in agreement here. Yes, God always keeps his promises because God is faithful. So last week, what the kids learned was this particular theme, that God called Moses. And they learned about the story of the burning bush, that Moses was born in Egypt, and then he fled in and, had a whole another 40 years of life and got an encounter with God through a bush that did not burn, but it was on fire, yet it did not get consumed. And he was told to go back and rescue God's people, Israel, from Egypt. And that's what today's story is. God delivered his people. And so that's what we're going to learn about. So God's people, the Israelites, and so you guys, this story is going to be kind of an involved story, and this is where I've been encouraging Pastor George to teach the kids at least once, because this teaching kids thing is wrecking me as a pastor. And I'm going to tell you why. I was trained to preach verse by verse, like from Genesis 1 through Revelation 21, whatever the final verse is. I think it's 19. But I am required now to teach from Genesis 5 through 12. So all those chapters, not just verses, but chapters. So it's been challenging, but I have enjoyed it along the way. And this lesson that I'm giving, a good chunk of it actually comes from the material that all the teachers are provided. I'll fill some stuff in and add some things that I think are important as we go along. But I'm saying this because within our children's ministry, within our kids' ministry, look, they're already leaving. I already lost them. but within our kids' ministry, we have people that aren't just teachers. So, this isn't to, puff him up. Leonard's been working with children's ministry for longer than some in this room have been alive. And he does not typically teach. He doesn't, he'll teach the children, he'll help them learn some stuff, but he isn't necessarily always an upfront teacher. Not everyone that works with our kids' church teaches. So if the Lord has been tugging on you and saying, maybe I could get involved in that sort of a ministry, we have all types of roles within the room for the adults to take. So I don't want you to look at what I'm doing and say, well, I can't do that. I'm not a seasoned teacher. I never went to seminary or something like that. It's all provided. So God's people, the Israelites, they were slaves in Egypt. And they had been there for quite a long time, and God had called Moses to come rescue them. And Moses and his brother Aaron went to Pharaoh. And who's the Pharaoh? Does anyone remember? Is he the president or king of Egypt? He's the king. And in fact, in that time, they thought he not only was king, but that he was God, that he was the God of Egypt and would become a god over them once he perished and his son became the next Pharaoh. So anyhow, so God calls Moses and says, hey, listen, my people have been in Egypt a really long time. They've been slaves for a really long time. They've been crying out for a really long time. I'm going to rescue them through you. And last week's story I'm not going to get into is when Moses did what most of you do when God asks you to go share or to help somebody with their life in terms of share your faith, share what you believe, because suddenly you go, I'm not really good at that. I don't know what to say, and you have all these reasons, and God says, that's perfect, because I'll talk through you instead. So Moses and his brother Aaron, they go to Pharaoh, who's the king of Egypt, and they told him, this is what the Lord God says for you to do. You are to let my people go. And you got to just let them go. And naturally, the Pharaoh, who thinks he's the king not only of Egypt, but probably the world, he says, well, who's the Lord? I don't know who this Lord person is. Who does he think he is telling me, the Pharaoh, what to do? And he says, these people are not going to be set free. They're not going to be allowed to go. Israel will not go. So God, in his power, sends 10. Now, oftentimes they're called plagues, and you're correct in saying that they're plagues. But today I want to call them something with a little more definition. They were like 10 disasters that happened. Some of them were plagues, as we would call like the bubonic plague, Omicron plague, Delta plague, whatever But not all these things were necessarily plagues. They were also just these disasters or these weird occurrences. And I'm going to explain later why these things happened, but we're going to go through them pretty quickly. So we're starting in the upper where it says 1, and we're working our way across, left to right, going downward. First of all, God turns all the water into Egypt into blood. Common teaching is he turned the Nile into the blood. It says he turned the Nile, its tributaries, the streams, the ponds, even the wooden and stone vessels that held the water became blood. That's what the scripture says, not just the Nile River itself. So he turns them to blood, and Pharaoh goes, I don't care. That's not a very big thing. I'm not letting your people go. So then God sends a bunch of frogs all over Egypt. And, I don't think you understand this, but frogs, not everyone likes them, okay? Like, these guys might not care about them too much, and sometimes girls don't mind them so much, but for some reason, when the girls get a little bit older, they don't like them as much. And anyhow, but these things were all over Egypt. They were just in everyone's houses. They were causing problems. You couldn't walk where you needed to walk, and people were tripping on them and whatnot. And Pharaoh says, okay, listen, I'm going to let your people go if you get rid of these frogs. So God takes the frogs away, but then Pharaoh says, never mind, I'm not letting the people go. Then he goes, great, God says, I'm going to send another plague or disaster your way, which is commonly taught as gnats, because there's not an English equivalent necessarily for this Hebrew word. People also most likely think this is actually fleas or mosquitoes because they bit the people. And gnats aren't known for being bothersome. They're just known for, like, when you're playing baseball and they just won't get away from you and they're just kind of flying around. They're just troublesome. Whereas fleas, mosquitoes, a little more troublesome. Some translations even say bed bugs or lice. But who cares necessarily what they were? There was just a whole bunch of them bothering the people and the animals. And so anyhow, so that's the third one. And that one doesn't seem to ever go away because it never talks about it going away. It just goes right to the fourth one, and it's a bunch of flies. Did anyone here grow up with animals, livestock, goats, pigs, horses, cows? Just me? Any flies? Any particularly odd smells around them? So flies, one of the things before I moved here to San Diego, Lee and I watched a video about San Diego's hot spots. Because we wanted to know where to disco, we wanted to know where to club, but no, it was like where the cool places to go in San Diego. But one of the comments when it was talking about Balboa Park was, San Diego is mysteriously void of insects, though there's so much foliage and flowers. But if you've ever lived elsewhere, there are a lot more bugs everywhere else, it seems like, but here. But there's a bunch of flies. All these flies come in. They're getting in everyone's food. They're getting in everyone's mouth when they're talking. Eventually the Pharaoh says, we've got to get rid of all these flies. We'll let your people go if you get rid of the flies. So they get rid of the flies, but Pharaoh refuses to let the people go. Fifth one, God caused a plague on Egypt's livestock. This is a true, more endemic, I think is what it's called, where locally all of these animals that they had, their cows, their pigs, their goats, their sheep, started to die.
That cow does not look very good.
No, this cow is getting close to death.
Its eyes are way open.
Yeah, they need X's on them that would prove their death. So the cattle and everything die. Again, I grew up in this sort of an environment where there was a lot of animals, and when animals die, when any living thing dies, you have to dispose of it fairly quickly, like within a day or two, because it starts creating other issues. And eventually, it'll create another fly issue, and another stink issue. And all the cattle were dying. All these things were dying. And this plague is really weighing heavy on all of Egypt, but Pharaoh kept saying, I'm not letting these people go. So God decides, I'm going to send a bunch of boils to cover the people. So kids, girls especially, but boys, you'll have the same problem, and you're going to have a bigger problem because they're going to have a way to cover up something that you won't have the ability to do. Boils are kind of like this thing called pimples or zits. They have makeup when they get older. You guys won't. So you have to grow your hair and comb it a certain way that day. But boils, I've had a few boils in my life for various reasons, and man, they're painful, and they're not the size of a pimple or a mosquito bite. They're bigger. They're like the size of your thumb print, and so, and they can be very sensitive. They can ooze. They can do all types of different things, and so these people are covered in boils. But the scripture says Pharaoh's heart continued to get harder, and God was using his power though to display who he is. And because God kept saying, I want my name to be known amongst the world through these things. But the Pharaoh just wouldn't relent. So along comes the seventh plague. God caused huge hail to fall. I think since I've lived in San Diego, I don't know, we've probably had hail 5 to 8 times. But we used to have that like within a couple of months where I grew up. Hail was very common where I grew up. And hail, it's basically what it's talking about here in Scripture is if you got some like tennis balls made of ice and just started throwing them at people, that's what this is doing. It's pillaging the earth, it's destroying the foliage, it's hitting people, it's hitting the remaining animals, and this hailstorm gets really bad, the crops begin to get destroyed, and Pharaoh's heart would not change, so the eighth plague comes along. God brought a bunch of locusts to eat the plants that were spared. So along comes these bugs called locusts. Now, locusts, if you've never seen a locust, they're like a cricket, but bigger. And they eat all the plants. And so, anyhow, then he brings these locusts. That's Bueller. Pharaoh would not let the people go. So along comes the ninth plague, which he caused darkness for 3 days. And the scripture says people basically didn't leave their house because when they left their house, they were bumping into each other and couldn't see what they were doing. And it gets kind of troublesome. You start getting hungry when you can't eat for 3 days or find your restroom for 3 days. And so Pharaoh still would not let the people go. And so finally, what ends up happening is Pharaoh, he is warned by Moses, listen, you think these 9 bad, disastrous things in your land are bad? What's about to come will top them all. And now's your time to let the people go. Because what's going to happen is this. Every firstborn Egyptian will die, but the Israelites will remain safe. So Pharaoh, it's on you. And Pharaoh ignored God, and he decided not to do anything. So God told the Israelites, families, to sacrifice a spotless lamb. God said, hey, listen, here's what I want you to do. This is how you're going to make sure that nobody firstborn in their family dies. So I got to make this a little bit personal. Taylor, I know that you might have a different response than I'm anticipating, but this would mean that tomorrow he wouldn't be here. Like gone. Okay, and I can't remember who's oldest in your family. Yeah. So many of you in this room are firstborns. And it would, like, in fact, if you're a firstborn, raise your hand. So in this plague, there's speculation it's firstborn son, but there's other verses that it makes it unclear. But a lot of people died that day, and it said, or are about to die, and the scripture says nobody went untouched. Every household had people die because there's a firstborn in basically every household. So here's what happens. God says, here's how this is going to not happen to you, Israel. You're going to take a spotless lamb, one with no blemish, no marks, and what you're going to do is you're going to sacrifice it. Do you guys know what sacrifice means? What's it mean?
That means you kill someone instead of yourself.
That's a good answer, but we're going to add to it a little bit. Did you guys hear what he said? Come up here and speak right into the microphone. Because it was a good answer, but we're going to add to it. Yeah.
Someone else dies besides you.
Somebody else dies beside you. That's a form of a sacrifice. That's called a substitutionary sacrifice. So his answer's good, actually, and it's where we're going towards. Grayson, did you want to say something different? It has to do with sacrifice.
They would have to
Yeah, so he said usually people would sacrifice like an animal to a god. David just turned it on. Go ahead.
So you would kill it, and it's like an offering to God.
Yeah. And so here's what I want to do, though. I'm going to narrow the definition of sacrifice down just a little bit, but both of their answers actually are very impressive for their age. Does that make sense? They are understanding substitutionary sacrifice, which we'll get to in a second. But ultimately, a sacrifice is giving up of something of value. Does that make sense? Like you're saying, I no longer will have this thing. I'm going to give it up for a cause, for a reason. And I'm just talking on the very simple definition of what sacrifice is. So what God said is, I want you to take your best lamb, this most precious lamb, the one that you think is cutest and sweetest, and you're going to sacrifice it. You're going to slaughter it, and you're going to take the blood, and what you're going to do with the blood, it's kind of gross, huh? You're going to take the blood. That's because it's an illustration of how gross our sin is to God. He's wanting us to see what he sees. And he said, what I want you to do is you're going to take the blood, and so kids, watch me. You're going to take the blood, and on the outside of your house, you're going to paint it up here, on the side, up here, and down the sides. So in other words, you're going to put like a red paint of blood around the front door of your house. That's what you're going to do to be saved. Which is just weird. It is. It is. But we're going to learn why it's weird. Because it's not God that's weird, really. In the perspective of things, it's us that's kind of are a little bit off. Because, we have a lot of, we have to have this conference this special thing on next Sunday because there's sin in our world. We're the ones that have a damaged life. So here's where we're going with the rest of this. So at midnight, well, first of all, the Israelites all do this. At midnight, God struck every firstborn in the land of Egypt, and they perished. They died. And there was so much sorrow that night because so many people died that it took this level of destruction where even Pharaoh's firstborn son died, where he finally said, okay, I will let these people go. The women, the men, the children, the grandparents, the aunts, uncles, their farms, their livestock from their farms and everything with them, just go. And the Israelites were ready, and it's speculated anywhere between 2.5 and 4 million people left because 600,000 of them were just the men, plus their wives, plus let's say 2 or 3 children, plus a whole bunch of servants and other people that aren't necessarily always numbered in these. So imagine moving like 2 or 3 cities of San Diego out of here to Yuma, and then let them wander around for 40 years. But it's millions of people are leaving all at the same time. And they took bread, and their animals with them. They had been slaves for quite a while, and now God was setting them free. You know what else that happened? They had friends in Egypt, because these people have been living here for a really long time, and their Egyptian friends also gave them clothing, and they also gave them jewelry and silver and gold and stuff like that. And so when they left, they were kind of like parting gifts from Egypt. Here's some stuff. And it fulfilled a scripture earlier in the chapter. But God led his people out of Egypt to a land that he had promised them. They had been for 430 years slaves, and now they are freed people. And I know I've told this story a bit lengthier because of the adults in the room, but I want to know, and I'm going to start here with Grayson, because I know, Grayson, you're going to be good at answering this question, okay? But I need one other helper from the female side. Come on up, and you're going to stand right here, and Grayson, you're going to stand right here. Is this one on, David? I'm going to have Grayson start, okay? And you're going to start by I don't want to hear all 10 of the plagues. Just tell me of this story. Like it started out with Moses going to Pharaoh with Aaron. Just start retelling the story. And then I'll stop you at a certain point. Tell me what you remember. Just Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh.
So when Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, Moses said, let people go, let the Israelites go, and he said no. And then God was angry with Pharaoh and put the 10 plagues.
Okay, we'll pause right there. And you don't have to name all the plagues. You can name a couple that you found interesting or exciting.
What do you mean?
Remember the square up there with the 9 things? Yeah? And so what were a couple of the things that happened?
The 3 frogs.
Yeah?
Another one.
Yeah? Give me just one more.
A fly.
Yeah, a bunch of flies.
A bunch of flies.
Yeah. And so what happened was every time God would send these problems their ways, did Pharaoh say, okay, these people can go now, or did he respond opposite of that?
He responded opposite.
What did he say?
He said, he changed the ideas.
Yeah, he said they can go, now they can't go. They can go.
Opposite.
Did the opposite. Then on the very last plague, which people died, what did Pharaoh do? Did he say they could leave, or that they had to stay?
That they could leave.
They could leave. And so when they left, how long had they been slaves? Do you remember? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Who remembers? You're like our oldest students.
400 years.
Plus 30. 430 years. That's like twice as long as we've been a nation almost. And so, you guys, I know that you didn't know all the 10 things, but they left Egypt, and what did they leave with? What did the Egyptians give them? Do you remember?
Gold, silver, and jewelry.
And what else?
Clothing.
Yeah, clothing. Perfect. You guys can sit down. One of the things I like to reiterate into stories is that they retell it. Does that make sense? When you hear the retelling, you hear how much they heard, how much they didn't hear, and it starts to burn in to the memory this way. And so what we need to understand, though, is we're telling a story that happened thousands of years ago, and how does it connect to Christ today? And so within the teachings, there's always a Christ connection. Where is this connecting them back to the story of Jesus Christ? And it's by God's grace that God spared Israel from judgment by requiring the blood of a lamb to be painted above their door so God would pass by or pass over their house. In the same way, Jesus Christ is that Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, and his death was the ultimate sacrifice. So those who trust in Jesus are saved, they're protected by Jesus' saving blood. And followers of Jesus are set free from the grip of sin. They're set free from the grip of sin, and they'll be passed over or spared for the final judgment. And I'm going to come back to this in a second, but that is the Christ connection. So one of the ways we also have the kids understand what went on is this video we're about to play. Are we ready with the video? Or should I just keep... I'm sorry, I didn't allow you guys a chance to cue that thing up. And so what typically comes along with this curriculum that we're using is the same story, but more in a child cartoon format. So it also puts memory back into their mind. And so you guys let me know if it's not going to work, I'll move on. I can act it out. Do you prefer mime or actually words? Okay. No. It's okay. If we can't do it, it's fine. All you guys understand, there's a video that'll retell the story, but in a more of a cartoony child way to understand it. So today's Bible story that we've learned, and this is kind of for the adults, but the kids, you guys can definitely learn from what I'm about to say here. But today's Bible story, it isn't a joyful one. It's not. It's full of disaster. It's full of death. It's full of destruction and sorrow. And so I'm going to explain why. Like, it's really simple, especially as adults, to begin to say, what kind of God is this? Like, where is he throwing like a tantrum? Like, what's going on? Like, these people, they don't want to follow him. Like, the Egyptians don't want to obey him, so he's just going to like pillage their land and kill them? Like, what the heck? And that's, when we look at it from that perspective, that kind of feeds into thinking, that type of thinking. So when we look at this, we have to explain why this happened. The Egyptians worshipped many false gods. Tons of false gods. And in fact, they worshipped gods that were supposed to protect the Nile. They worshipped gods that were supposed to protect their livestock, supposed to protect their crops. They worshipped gods that were supposed to protect the sun. And even Pharaoh himself was considered the god of the land. And so what was happening was each disaster was affecting this belief of who is supreme, who is really God. Is it the single God that the Jewish people were worshiping, or is it all these false gods? And when you look at these plagues, each one is attacking one of these type of false gods that the Egyptians have high honor and high respect towards. And what was happening was that the Egyptians were beginning to understand, and you start seeing it as you read the story verse by verse, that the Egyptians began to understand that their false gods had no power and they could not stop the real God of the universe. And after a while, Pharaoh's own priests and magicians were coming to him and saying, we got to give it up. We cannot protect our people anymore. Their God is too strong. Their God is the God. And they were getting really upset about the whole thing and trying to usurp Pharaoh's power by telling him what to do, and it only emboldened him more. Also, God was not hardening Pharaoh through most of this. Pharaoh himself, his own heart, kept getting harder and harder. You're not going to tell me what to do. Who do you think you are? Who does your God think he is? You will not. I will not, give in. I will not stop what's happening here because I'm in control here. And so, Christian, I want to ask a really simple question. What false god are you counting on to protect you right now? And I'll guarantee you have some false god set up, and you're not necessarily worshiping it. You don't necessarily have some idol set up with candles or incense burning in front of it. But you might be trusting money. You might be trusting reputation. You might be trusting your educational level. You might be trusting your relationship with somebody or a particular health level that you've achieved. You might be trusting in a false god. And what false god are you counting on for protection? And perhaps some area of your life, and this is going to speak mostly to the adults, what area of your life is right now a disaster? Because there might be right there the key that God is wanting to be Lord even over that area. Because it might be an area that you have a false god set up thinking will protect you and rescue you. God is showing you his power even over that area. And when you hear about the Pharaoh's stubborn heart, do you see yourself in that? Saying, I'm going to hang on one more day before I give in to God. I'm going to spend one more dollar. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go one more class, one more counseling session, one more this before I give in. Before you'll finally admit that you're weak in that area and God is strong, and he will be your God in that area, not that false thing that you set up. God planned to save his people from slavery, and nothing could stop God's plan. And God has a plan to save you from whatever it is that you're enslaved to in your own life. And we're having this porn thing next week, where or it might be a money issue where you think I just have to work harder, more hours to finally get out of debt. But God has some plan He's trying to save you from, some sort of slavery that you've put yourself into. And the turmoil that might exist in your life right now might be because you're not listening to God, who's trying to rescue you from that thing, and he's allowing it to happen. He's allowing that disaster to unfold so that you'll see his power. Nothing will stop God's plans for your life. God made a promise to Abraham to bless the families of the world. And God has made a promise through you that you will be a blessing to the families of the world if you follow Jesus Christ. And all he's doing is refining you in that plan. He's chipping away things, the burrs and the rough edges, to make you part of that greater plan that he has for us. Because we know from the bigger picture question, which was, does God keep his promises? What is the answer? Yes. God always keeps his promises because he's faithful. So Christian, one other thing about today's story, and this is super important to hear, and I'm right now talking more just to the adults. This is super important to hear as a Christian. Israel did not earn God's favor. They weren't doing anything more special than the Egyptians. You don't see them doing special Jewish things in Egypt during these stories, and that the Egyptians were doing something completely different. They were living just the same as the Egyptians. They just happened to be part of God's promise, the original promise to Abraham. God didn't rescue Israel from slavery because they were really good or they were really holy or really religious. Israel was just as much in need of a Savior and forgiveness as the Egyptians were. They weren't any different. And so before the last plague, what did Israel have to do to make sure God passed over their sin? Do you remember? Go ahead. Yeah, the blood on the doorpost. Because if they didn't do it, they would die also in their sin in the same way the Egyptians were going to. It's not because they were special. It's not because that God thought they were awesome. They had to sacrifice a lamb and paint its blood around the door, and the Israelites had to be reminded by God, you're no better than the Egyptians. This is just so I can tell you apart. Just that thing is going to make me tell the difference. Otherwise, you don't seem any different than those people. And so Christian, let me say it this way. They were spared because of God's mercy. They were spared because of God's mercy. They were spared, why? Because of God's mercy. They trusted God at his word, not all the time. Because if you've ever read the book of Exodus, they don't always trust him at his word. But in this case, they did. And by sacrificing that lamb's blood, they were spared, and a lamb died in place of them. Does that make sense? A lamb died in place of each family. Christian, you aren't spared because you act really good or somehow you impress God. And he thought, oh, wow, I really want that person on my team. You're spared because God's mercy. Why are you spared? Because of God's mercy. You've trusted God at his word. By Jesus' sacrificial blood, you were spared because Jesus died in your place. You were spared because Jesus died in your place in the same way that lamb and its blood, represented by its death, saved those people back then. Numbers 24:19, we read it at the beginning. God is not a man, so he does not lie. He's not human, so he does not change his mind. He has ever spoken, and has he ever spoken and failed to act? Has he ever promised and not carried it through? Our key passage is a reminder that God is not like people. He's completely 100% trustworthy. And even if you get somebody that's got a high moral value and they almost always keep their word, sometimes they just can't. Their car breaks down, so they couldn't pick you up. They made a different promise to somebody else and they forgot about it, and they had to keep that other promise first. So it doesn't matter how trustworthy even the best people are, eventually they won't keep their word. But God is all-powerful and always keeps every promise he makes. And so that's what this story has been about. Does God keep his promises? And in the kids' lesson, which doesn't go this long, they always understand that, yes, God keeps his promises. And so adults, God is probably trying to keep some promise to you that he's made through his word to you. And if it's not been fulfilled yet, it might be one, because there might be some more waiting period to happen. It also might be that you might be resistant to something that he's trying to change in your life so that promise can be fulfilled. So here's where we're going to close. Now would be the time, if this was a children's lesson, where we'd break them into groups. We're not going to do this in here. We'd break them into groups, and they would have a person ask them, an adult talking with them, asking some questions, some key questions from the verses to learn from that applies directly into their lives. But my application for you today, Christian, is to remember two things. You are saved because of what? Well, grace, but let's that one's like the correct Bible answer. Sunday school points. But more so, we're saved because of God's mercy. And I realize some of you are like, oh, let's get into the theological debate of grace and mercy. I don't want to do that. But I understand what you're saying when you say grace. It's the right answer, as long as you can answer the next question, what is grace? It might be harder to answer than what is mercy. So, Scripture, is it true? God's Word? Yes. Is it true, God's Word? Is it true? Is it hard to read sometimes? It is. Adults, is it hard to read sometimes? Yes, believe it or not. Sometimes it's hard to understand. Sometimes it's hard to trust. But it's true. And it's right. And it's built into our lives for God's glory and for our growth.
Isn't grace getting something even though you don't deserve it?
You want to know, is grace getting something even though you don't deserve it? Would that be called God's grace? Scott, what would you call it? Getting something, good, better, and best, that you don't deserve. And if you're wondering, children, what grace is, it happens twice a year typically in your life. Your birthday and Christmas, you get something you don't deserve. You can ask your parents later what that meant. So that's it. I wanted you today to understand that when our kids are leaving the room, they're getting theology, they're getting Bible story, and they're getting application, and then they're getting group discussion, and then they also have some fun. They do some games, they do some crafts and some other stuff. And today, they got that bounce house thing out there, and I know a couple of you adults will want to be out there, so we're gonna close this thing out. Jared, did we have music? Yeah. Is it the whole choir? So I got to move stuff? While you guys are getting set up, I am going to pray. Scott, you probably need that, huh? I am going to pray. Come on. Come on up. Okay, so we're going to pray. Heavenly Father, I pray right now that today, what we've learned about God's mercy, about your mercy, Father, towards us, would be a lasting memory. What we would remember is that you have put into our lives an opportunity to know you more, to understand you more through your word. And God, help us to, during the roughest times, either if we're 4, 14, 44, or 84, God, help us to remember that your promises are always accurate. Your promises are always true. You always keep your promises to us. And God, you have offered salvation, and many in this room have received that salvation you offer. And I pray, God, for those who just struggle and say, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what's wrong with my life. I don't know what's going on. But God, I ask right now that you would speak to that person and that you would help them to confess that they don't know what's wrong with themselves and that they have an issue with sin or something in their life that is causing a separation between you and them. And God, would you speak deeply into their hearts today that they can ask for forgiveness and receive the promise of your salvation and your rescue. God, bless our children every week with the knowledge of Jesus Christ, way beyond any of us ever learned as children. And I pray these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.